On today's Transport Evolved, Apple Watch apps, BMW's big security flaw, and oil changes for electric cars. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 228 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Sunday, 8th of February 2015. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield, and I'm your usual host into the world of future car technology. If it's cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter, we cover it here on Transport Evolved. And before we get started onto today's show, I just want to apologise for there not being a show last week. We had planned to have the wonderful Ben Nelson on talking about all of his latest DIY projects, including his plans to convert his garage into a solar garage and his work on a Vectrex electric scooter that he was salvaging and getting running with old Ford Escape hybrid parts. So for those who don't know, Ben is very much into his DIY and make do and mend scene, which I think is fantastic for our modern age. But unfortunately, due to a family crisis, you weren't able to do the show. Today is that show. A week later, we've picked up some of the items from that show and put them into today's show. And for some reason, despite me redoing the lower thirds, they still maintain that it's actually the 1st of February. I do not know why. I've recreated them 3 times in a row. It's obviously a software glitch somewhere in the system, but 2 people hopefully who don't have any software glitches today joining us for the show. First, from the East Coast, Tesla owner, writer on all things tech with a specialist in Mac things, and also works at electrek.co and 9to5mac.com. Please welcome back to the show, Seth Weintraub. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Good. And you've been busy this morning with Lego.
Yes, we were doing a windmill project with Legos, which is a lot of fun.
Fantastic. And I always think it's really funny because Americans say Legos, and over here we say Lego, which is, and it's just going to, I know it's one of those things. People accuse me of having Americanisms, but it's one thing I will not do. I will not say Legos. I say Lego. Legos. Someone who's joining us from north of the 49th. Someone I don't know. Do you say Lego or Legos farther up north? Matt Stevens. Good morning or good afternoon. He's forgotten to I've forgotten to unmute himself.
Sorry, we say Lego.
You say Lego too.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, there you go. It's those Americans, those weird Americans. They say Legos.
Well, we say math. And not maths.
And we say maths. There you go. That's where the S has gone. It's the missing S has been transferred. Right. So for those who don't know, Matt works at Cross Chasm, who is a fantastic company focused on tracking everything from gas mileage in conventional fleet cars through to EV stuff as well. And Matt, you've also worked on some pretty interesting electric vehicle projects over your time, including extraterrestrial variety of vehicles as well. I think you're the only guest that I've ever had on the show who can claim to have an extraterrestrial vehicular experience in their resume. But let's get on with today's show. Seth, we're going to chat with you to begin with about Elon Musk's appearance on The Simpsons a couple of weeks ago. Now, we talked about it on the show, and you've written a very good post over at Electrek talking about Elon Musk's appearance. We did a very kind of tongue-in-cheek one, talking about 5 things that, that episode told us, not really, about The Simpsons, and some people took it very seriously. But you wrote a much more considered piece. How did you find Musk's appearance on The Simpsons?
I mean, it's The Simpsons. Like, I understand some people take his role in society very seriously, but it's The Simpsons. All of his mannerisms were kind of exaggerated a little bit.
Yep.
So,
And the thing that got me was, because as you said, you alluded to, there was lots of people who watched the episode. I saw message boards really just accelerate after the episode had aired, complaining about, Fox did this, Fox did that, they're just backed by oil companies and climate change deniers, and they made Elon Musk out to be the baddie at the end because he loses Mr. Burns all his money and whatever. But at the end of the day, Elon Musk took part in it, and he provided his own vocal talents to this show. So if Elon Musk looked at the script, read the script, and then went, yeah, all right, I'll do it, then I think that's the spirit in which we should watch the episode. And I thought it was bloody brilliant, actually. I've watched it and I thought it was hilarious.
I was entertained by it as well.
There were just some lovely touches.
I think maybe Elon Musk has a little bit better sense of humor than a lot of the people who took offense to it, because it is The Simpsons, and I imagine those same people would be very upset with the monorail episode where they built this nice clean monorail that eventually just ruined the city. But
and the funny thing is, Elon Musk has been on South Park now a couple of times, and he I hadn't seen as much criticism of that as I did of the Simpsons episode. And I don't know if that's because, obviously, as we all know, South Park, they never actually get the real people to provide the vocal talent, and it's obviously a spoof, and it's obviously satirical. But it just seems really stupid that people were going... I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. Seems really stupid that people were getting rubbed up the wrong way about the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla going on The Simpsons, providing his own vocal talents to a script which he presumably approved. I thought it was brilliant. Matt, did you see it? Has it aired in Canada yet?
I think it aired, but I was traveling when it aired, so I missed it.
Okay.
We have trouble streaming the US streams here, so unfortunately I haven't seen it.
I shouldn't tell you this. There's a fantastic TV media server called Plex, which I converted to about 6-8 weeks ago. And Plex is awesome because it allows you to share libraries with friends. So I had a friend who had it recorded who let me stream it through theirs. It was just very, very clever. Very cool. All right, so we get a thumbs up then, Seth, from you at least on this one.
It was fun.
Matt, you've been working, obviously, the My EV project. It wasn't a Kickstarter, it was an Indiegogo. Give us a sort of a 50,000 foot overview of the project and how you're getting on with that.
Sure. So it's basically taking our fleet EV logger and making one for individuals. It's a bit more social. So we were originally hoping to ship back late fall, so we missed the original deadline, but now we have about 25% of the backers have their units. Those are backers that only use Android phones. We had a bit of a fun Apple licensing issue, so we had to spool up Bluetooth low energy units very quickly. So I just got back from San Diego Friday at midnight. I'm hoping to get good news from the team first thing tomorrow morning about shipping those units. Right. But I'm excited to get those units out.
And it's worth noting, of course, your Kickstarter campaign was essentially to give people who have electric vehicles the ability, and plug-in hybrids, the ability to track their energy usage and compete against one another and see literally how efficient they're driving, and to track the state of the battery. And that's something that people haven't really paid attention to. But you've done a fantastic video on YouTube talking about battery degradation and how battery degradation happens, why it happens, and how you can calculate it in an electric vehicle. If you haven't watched it, you should go and search it out, because that is an excellent video. Explains it very easily. You've explained it previously on this show, but let's talk about for a second the technological hurdles that you faced, because when you build an app, when you build something through a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo project, the hurdle for you was the fact that the Bluetooth device that you'd built, Apple wouldn't allow you to use it, right? You had to create a new version of that to work with a slightly different protocol, because Apple really constrains what it's doing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we built our units with Bluetooth 2.1. We have what's called an MFI made for iPhone license. So we thought we were on side, but when we tried to get the app in the store before shipping, we realized we had the wrong license. So Apple keeps Apple keeps a really tight ecosystem, and I think some of the reason is to make sure it's a good experience for iPhone users. And I think some is sort of business model, but we had a pretty big landmine right before we're about to ship.
And it's an interesting thing, Seth. We've been talking before about sort of security and patches and the way that Apple and some other companies really keep things really tight. This week, I heard some rumors from Tesla owners who were moaning about the fact that Tesla has kind of restricted now more who can connect to its servers, and some of the third-party apps that people had built either by packet sniffing or just by a bit of guesswork or maybe looking at Tesla's official apps and then kind of duplicating it with their own apps, have now discovered that they can no longer access Tesla's servers. And lots of people have been saying that's not a good idea, that's not fair, etc., etc. But Tesla, like Apple, needs to be really quite careful about its security, doesn't it?
Well, maybe even more so because, you don't want somebody controlling your car while you're driving it, or, now Tesla has these upcoming. They have the hardware to actually control the car. So theoretically, somewhere down the line, you could actually take control of the car and drive it off and do whatever. So, obviously they're concerned about the security, and it probably means a little bit more to have your car secure than your phone. But, I use a couple of third-party apps and they still work. So I don't know where the line was drawn. Tesla uses this Brew communication protocol. And people have been using, the packet sniffers or little snitches or whatever to figure out. And it's pretty much all documented. So, I think they made me change my password to something a little bit longer a couple months ago. But other than that, from a user perspective, I haven't noticed anything. I have seen the people remarking about the changes, though.
Yeah, and it's interesting because today I actually put out an interview request with Kristen Paget, the Tesla's hacker princess.
Yes.
I have actually sort of reached out to her. I will reach out officially to her via Tesla at some point and ask her if she can give us an interview, just on, not necessarily on Tesla, but on the threats facing autonomous cars and connected cars, and we'll come on to that later on in the show today. But Matt, before we kind of leave My EV, any attempts or plans to do smartwatch versions of those apps?
Yeah, I think so. I think to view the data, we want EV owners to be able to view their data on their watch. I don't, given all the Bluetooth connectivity issues we've had, I don't think we will use the watch as a way to get data up for analysis.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on. Tesla B&B, Airbnb. Seth, you wrote about this week. Surely this is just a guy who has a place that he wants to offer on Airbnb, and he just wants the extra kudos of having a Tesla. That
sounds like it. I mean, you don't want anybody sleeping in your car, I imagine. But
it just I had to include that and say that it's on Seth's website, electrek.co, and it was just very funny. This one guy in Arizona, I believe, and that's the other thing. It must be pretty hot at nighttime, even if you're in a Tesla with the air conditioning on. I should think that must be pretty hot.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird story. I think it was a publicity stunt, as you probably agree. And
yeah. But hey, we're talking about it now, so it must have worked.
So it worked.
All right, Matt. Being the Canadian, I have to get your opinion on this next story. This is a guy from Edmonton, in Canada, in Alberta, and they get a lot of snow, don't they, in the winter, Matt?
A ton.
They get a ton. And so he came up with this idea about 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's being considered by at least certain people in the city of Edmonton. Something called a freezeway. This is brilliant. The idea being that they make what would be a cycle path during the summer, and then they would freeze it over in the winter, allow it to freeze, and then it would become like a 7 kilometer long path that can be skated in the winter, or walked or cycled in the summer. And I think that's just a brilliant idea. The idea being that it'd be zero emissions, and the idea is to try and get more Edmontonites to skate and be more active during the winter months. Forget the car, right? Would you do it?
I totally would. I'm from Ottawa, and so I used to commute around on the canal, and the video you just showed the canal at the end, and I know a lot of people that skate to work.
Wow,
it's very Canadian, and it's not something you enjoy doing in minus 30, but it's the canal gets a lot of use, and a lot of people do use it as a means of transit, not just entertainment.
Okay. Do you think it would ever catch on somewhere like New York, Seth?
Sure, why not?
I mean, this would be great.
Mountainous over here, but yeah.
I mean, anywhere that's cold enough, make a skateway, encourage people to skate. Now, some of the quotes, Matt, that I didn't get. I mean, he was saying it was going to take an hour and 45 minutes to skate. I'm assuming if you were a speed skater, if you were someone who played hockey a lot and you were used to being a bit of a faster skater, maybe you could have like lanes like they have in swimming pools. So like the slow skaters on the left and the fast guys on the right. Surely that would take less than an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, I hope
cover.
so. Yeah,
it was 11 kilometers, I think, total. 11 kilometers.
Yeah, if you're averaging 5-6 kilometers an hour, that would be painfully slow if you're trying to get somewhere.
I just thought that was brilliant. I had to mention it. It's just one of those weird ones. All right, talking of sports, last week it was the Super Bowl. Did either of you watch?
Yeah, I watched.
Yeah.
Great game.
Yeah, great
absolutely.
game. Right until the last minute, I understand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And watched half. Did you watch the ads? Obviously, they're the big thing. Everyone watches the ads.
I did.
Okay, so here is BMW's ad.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that.
That's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about,
Yeah.
but I'd never heard it.
Around
I'd never
or
heard it
about.
said. I'd always
That's
seen
right.
the mark. There it is. At AM feedback. Com. I mean,
What
what
do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway? What do you write to it like mail?
There's Allison. Can you explain what internet is?
See, that's what I said. What do you mean there's nothing under the hood? Katie said she thought this was a car.
Yeah.
And it's built using wind? Like from a windmill?
Or a fan? Or a turbine? Or a fan vine?
I mean, what is I3 anyway?
Allison, can you explain what I3 is?
The all-electric BMW i3, built in a wind-powered factory with the strength of carbon fiber and BMW performance.
So that was the ad, and I cut out the twerking bit at the end. But it was obviously with Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel from who used to be on Good Morning America. The idea being the conceit behind it being that 21 years ago we all thought the internet was a crazy place and it would never catch on, and they're kind of BMW is alluding to that same thing now. Smart ad or terrible ad? There seems to be two different camps on this. There's lots of people who've been very excited about it, and again, lots of people who are very angry and upset and saying BMW is just whitewashing. I think it was a success. What about you guys?
I'll jump in. So I think it was a great ad, and the reason is because on a high level, a lot of people don't understand electric cars, but equating it to the internet and, about this thing that's going to be huge and nobody quite gets it yet, or not everybody quite gets it yet. The mainstream doesn't quite get it yet. And, making it seem like this is this thing that's about to come that everybody's going to understand soon and it's going to be a big deal. Just like the internet was. I think that's a good thing to do overall. I mean, they kind of said i3 instead of electric cars, whereas they probably, if they were, being a little bit more altruistic, they would have said, hey, this is about the electric car movement, not just about this one particular, fairly mediocre electric car. That would have been better for everybody. But overall, I think it was a great ad because, I don't think everybody's seen, I had seen that before, but that clip of Bryant Gumbel on the Today Show with Katie Couric, trying to figure out what the internet was. It seems crazy because those people, you've seen those people, and just 2 decades ago they were clueless, and of course everybody knows what an email address is now. So the thing there being like, hey, everybody's gonna be talking about electric cars and know everything about electric cars in a few years, so get on board.
I think you're completely right on that one. Matt, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I loved it for a lot of the same reason. Like it for me, the ad sort of underscored what seems like the design approach for the i3, which is that it's not a it's not like a gas car. It's not trying to be a gas car. You know, having driven the i3, it is the most awkward car I've ever driven, and beautifully so. I love that it's very clear that the engineers were not told to make this feel like a gas car. They were told to make it feel the best way it could, given that it's electric, and you know, this very severe amount of regen that they have on it, and the fact that there is zero coast. Like it's an unusual feel on how you drive. It feels a little awkward. But then once you come used to it, you realize it's just a much better way. And so it seems like the engineers were told, don't try and make this feel like a gas car. And I think that ad also made it very clear that, you know, it's going to be different and it's not trying to be the same. And in the end, it'll be much better.
Very interestingly, one of our chat room viewers has said they think that claiming that the i3 is as groundbreaking as the internet was rather presumptuous and a little selfish. And BMW has apparently been repeating the ad non-stop since on NBC. So it's obviously milking this ad. I think you can cut it one of two ways. I mean, when you think about how companies have been selling themselves over the decades, that kind of "hey, look at us" ad does certainly work. You only have to look at some of the ads that Apple has run over the last 2 decades, right, Seth? I mean, Apple's ads have been, "We are the best. Nobody else matters." I mean, you don't have to think about the Mac versus PC ads, right?
Right. Yeah. No, Apple has very little shame in that whole area of.
All right. Yeah. So let's move to the final story of the segment. NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration this week in the States, has announced that cars with an electric motor that are capable of moving without a gasoline engine, that essentially means electric, hybrid, and presumably hydrogen fuel cell, although it doesn't mention that in the documentation I've seen, must emit a noise, an artificial noise, to alert pedestrians of their presence. This comes in, this is essentially part of a law that was passed in, believe it or not, 2011 by the federal government. And those standards haven't yet been turned into regulations. That law hasn't yet become regulations for the automotive industry. But on September 1st, 2018, it will become mandatory. What sort of noises do we think we're going to start hearing? Now, I don't mind noisemakers. I don't think they're very effective. I question the efficacy of them. And I've got a Volt and a Leaf. My Leaf makes such a feeble noise alert system, I don't even notice it. And you can turn it off. And the Volt has that wonderful which sounds like a cat trying to get something very high up, like a moth. That's this kind of noise that cats make, that kind of machine gunning when they want to get your attention. And there's a little button on the Volt that you can do that announces your presence. Seth, obviously your car doesn't have a noisemaker at all. So I'd like both of your opinions on this. And do you think it will be... This is a one-way street, or do you think there's still hope for those who prefer their quiet cars to be quiet, Matt?
So I much prefer not having a noisemaker. I have the Volt, so which I use as a polite way to give people a wave as I'm driving away.
Yes, I do that.
But as far as constant noise, like we drive vehicles all the time here that have those noisemakers, and I love the silence of an EV, and so that low hum drum kind of gets in the way on like some of the other vehicles that we've had here. So selfishly, I wish it wasn't there, but I understand why it's there, and I realize it's needed, especially for those that are visually impaired trying to walk the streets. Mm-hmm. So I respect why it's there, and I do hope that there's an aftermarket for it where you can customize it and have a little bit more fun with it, because that low, boring hum just doesn't fit driving electric.
It's really sad, actually. I would quite like the background engine room hum from Star Trek. And I discovered about 2 months ago, when I was going through a particularly stressful period with my kids, and they were having lots of arguments while I was trying to work from home. I've got a set of the new Bose noise cancelling headphones, the latest generation. Those on with someone has looped the background noise to Star Trek Enterprise, or the Next Generation Enterprise, on a loop, and you can just play that in the background, and it's just very soothing for me. So maybe something like that for me. Seth, what would you choose if you had to choose something?
Well, so there's a couple things here. One, in the Tesla, you can turn the AM radio to a station that doesn't exist and turn it all the way up, and you get this, like, you can actually hear the revolutions of the motor.
Oh yeah,
and it sounds like a like a car. So, but obviously the inside of the car is fun for all of us, but it's more important what's happening on the outside of the car, because that's what the regulations are covering. So what's interesting is Elon Musk was asked a question similar to this about a year ago at a stockholders thing about the sound of the car, and he had a really interesting answer. A typical Tesla situation where not only are they anticipating having to do something like this, but they're kind of doing some innovation in that area. And Tesla's actually working on a device that's sensing where people are and will actually direct noise at them rather than, just in general all the time. And, my question is, well, why not just do it all the time? Because, human beings are the only, it's like one of those, the tree falls in the woods. Does anybody hear it? It's, you're trying to keep it quiet because you don't want to annoy people, or
right.
Theoretically. So why only turn it on when people are around? Why not just leave it on and, whatever. But so Tesla's very aware of the situation. I'm sure GM and Nissan and the other BMW and pretty much everybody, I guess, is making electric cars. I'm sure they're aware of the situation. I just know that Tesla in particular is working on a solution that kind of aims the noise at potential hazards. And I guess, that kind of goes along with their autonomous driving stuff, where they can distinguish people and targets and people who would have to be concerned. I guess maybe like, somebody's on the sidewalk next to you, that's somebody who should hear the noise, but maybe like people behind you or, whatever, maybe they should not hear the noise. So maybe the noise will just be going forward or in the direction that you're heading or something like that. I don't know.
Interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, and there will be ways around it. I've done some unofficial tests in the past where it doesn't. I've actually tested it with blind people who've said they couldn't actually hear the noisemaker, but they could hear the car on both occasions. So that's another interesting one.
Right.
And a lot of people said it does move the burden from the driver and onto the pedestrians, and I think that is the wrong way, because obviously when I pass my driving test, you're the one driving the big several ton hunk of metal that can kill, maim and destroy, so therefore you should be the one to notice. And in all my years of driving zero emission silent electric vehicles and hybrids and whatnot, I think I've only had 2 instances in nearly 10 years where people have kind of leaped out unintentionally and then taken a double take. Let's have an ad break.
Now, I think.
Oh, sorry, Matt. You were
Actually, I think it could be a fun way to have some fun and customize your car and also do pranks on each other. I know I have some folks that I'd love to put "Hail to the Chief" on their noisemaker.
That would be hilarious. And on that note, we shall have an ad break and we'll be right back. Do you enjoy the show? Do you like wearing fun and unique clothes that support the things you love? Then you're going to want to head over to www.transportevolved.com/shop, where you can show support of Transport Evolved by buying one of our fabulous Transport Evolved branded apparel. We've got everything from hoodies and t-shirts to water bottles, badges and tote bags, and they'll be sent direct from our partners at Spreadshirt to your home address in double quick time. What's more, by buying something from our shop, you'll be sending us a little kickback as a thanks for our hard work on the show, and you'll get something unique and fun, and we'll get some warm fuzzy feelings knowing we can continue to bring you a great show every week. What's not to love? And we're back, and part 2, we're going to be talking about essentially about cars and charging standards. Now, this is going to be an interesting question because we didn't have a show obviously a couple of weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago we had the announcement from BMW and Volkswagen, which you'll see now, and this is obviously concerning the deployment of CCS quick charging in different parts of the US, the East Coast and the West Coast corridors. Interestingly, on the West Coast, they're only going up from San Diego up to Portland, Oregon. They're not going up to Washington. I don't know what Washington State did to upset these two companies, but they're only going as far as Portland. Sorry. But on the East Coast, I think it's it's Boston down to New York and then down to Washington, D.C. So quite extensive corridors. Following on from that, obviously Nissan said it's going to expand its own network of DC CHAdeMO quick charge stations. They're competing standards, which brings me to the question of which standards should people be considering when they're buying a new car? Now, Seth, obviously you use a Tesla that has the supercharger standard, which is a completely different standard again. It's proprietary at the moment to Tesla, although it is open source. A couple of people recently pulled me up for saying proprietary open source and saying that's an oxymoron, but actually in this case it isn't, because although it's open source, no one else is using it, so therefore it is still proprietary. Where do we go? I mean, do we say to people buy a CCS car because that's the official standard? Do we say buy a Tesla? Do we say buy a car with CHAdeMO because they've got more charging stations? Seth, where would you advise people go?
I would kind of look at the other aspects of the car at this point, because so CHAdeMO currently, from a technology perspective, isn't quite as robust as I guess it's a real standard now. So but for me, Tesla has a CHAdeMO adapter for Teslas. So Model S's. So I look around for CHAdeMO stations as alternatives for superchargers, whereas there is no adapter yet for what is that? It's off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of
the CCS one, you mean?
CCS standard. But, if you look at the CCS standard, another generation or two down the line, they're going to have as much power coming through the charger as a supercharger will. Mm-hmm. So, and whereas CHAdeMO doesn't really have a roadmap like that. Also, I mean, if you're in the U.S. or Europe, there are a significant amount of CHAdeMO stations around, but the standard is, and what BMW and Mercedes and Volkswagen and Chevy and Ford are going with, it kind of seems like that's going to be the way. And also the
right.
We're going to have. What would be nice is if all three groups could come together and say, "Hey, look, here's an adapter technology that works from one to another." So whatever happens in the future, you can go to any of these stations and have something work. I know I met the guy from PlugShare who was doing his cross country Tesla road trip, and he had a CHAdeMO adapter with him. It was a beta, and he said it was fantastic. It worked really well. He needed it to go up to Maine because there were no superchargers up there, but he stopped at a couple of Nissan dealers on the way up.
Right.
And he said it was fine. A little bit slower, but way better than a level 2.
And this is the challenge though, when you've got this multiple charging standards, all different countries having different standards. There are 2 different standards of CCS. So if you're in Europe and you're in the US, there are different versions of CCS. One based on the J1770 type, what we call in Europe called the Type 1 plug, and then we have one that's based on the Type 2 plug. So that's confusing. Interestingly, though, I think it's also down to governments and companies and countries to work together. I recently, in fact, this morning, I watched a review of a Japanese man who had just got in the Japanese market version of the Volkswagen E-Up, obviously K-class cars, K-Jidoza, I think they call them, don't they? They are very, very popular over there. So the E-Up is going to be a very popular car because it's so small. Over in Europe, it's based on CCS charging. And in Japan, they use CHAdeMO. And there's no space in the socket, in the charge port door at the back. There's no space in that area for both a CHAdeMO and a Type 1 or J1772 plug. So the standard slow charge is hidden under the hood in a special box that they've modified on this particular Japanese market car. So the rapid charger is easily accessible, but then if you want to charge it in at home, you have to lift the hood up and plug in, snake your cable in. It's crazy. I've seen the same thing happen on the i3 in Japan as well. Same thing. i3 in the rest of the world uses CCS. In Japan, because CHAdeMO is the standard, they've got a CHAdeMO socket hidden under the hood and then a standard socket at the back. So I just wish that all automakers should just go, from this date, we're all going to use the same standard. It would just make everyone's lives so much simpler. And frankly, I don't care which. But I take on board what you're saying, Seth, about the CCS having more scope than CHAdeMO. Matt, where do you sit on this?
From an engineering perspective, I prefer CCS, like the combo coupler. I think it's standards better, the scalability is better. But I think in the end, it doesn't really matter. I think the key is everyone needs to invest in adapters. Like if we can't get our standard power plug, wall plug to agree in North America or Europe, I don't think we have much chance in getting full agreement on fast charging, at least anytime soon. So
No,
I think the
that's
solution
true.
is just getting better, getting adapters and letting everyone play together. When I go to Europe, I bring my Canada to UK adapter, and
Yep.
I think I just do the same thing with my car.
Yep, and it's interesting. I think when we get wireless charging, maybe that's when it will all standardize. Because obviously, wireless charging, there's only so many ways you can induce a current from one place to another in a wireless charge setup, and I suspect that will be the golden thing. I mean, this. I mean, I'm taken with wireless charging ever since I bought this. This is a Mobo wireless charging thing for the Apple mouse. And it's changed the way I use my computer because I don't have to worry about charging it anymore. I just whack it on when I'm finished for the day and it's charged the next day. I actually would quite like that in an electric vehicle. All right, let's talk about security. BMW last week patched its connected drive services. I can't say this with a straight face. To prevent unauthorized access to some 2.2 million cars, including BMWs, Rolls-Royces, and obviously all the BMW fleet and the electric cars as well. Connected drive software is massive, really super duper massive. I mean, we're talking huge amount of software and hardware. Very, very, very tough to get all of this technology working together. But it's becoming the norm in the car world now. You can have this connected drive software. You turn up, jump into your car, your phone connects to your car. It connects to your home network, all these extra services that allow you to book parking, find charging stations if you need to, find when the next train's leaving in the nearby station if you hit traffic, etc., etc. But BMW had done this all unencrypted between the car and the server, and was sending data in the clear between the car over its cellular connection to BMW's server. And some folks at the German Automobile Club discovered this. BMW hastily rolled out the patch. How on earth did this happen, Seth? I mean, if this happened in a computing technology system, this would be, wow.
Well, so this kind of thing does happen quite frequently in computer systems. I mean, for a while, even a decade ago, you could probably get credit card numbers by being man in the middle.
Yeah.
So it's not quite surprising because, engineers left to do, what they do without specifications and standards will probably take the easiest and the quickest and the most efficient route, which is not encrypting. So somewhere, down the line, nobody was checking to make sure that the communication was encrypted and nobody made it encrypted. So, it's not surprising to me. It's crazy that it happened, but look how many. It seems like every day there's a new credit card company that's losing their data or insurance company or whatever. And a lot of these are really stupid mistakes. And it's hard to be surprised anymore when you see something like this.
I think the thing that scared me was because obviously this software can unlock your car. You can send it a command to unlock your car, which, all you need is a very enterprising hacker to work with some very enterprising car thieves, and you've suddenly got loads of cars. Matt, this is a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? Any software developer and engineer would
Yeah, exactly.
This is your nightmare scenario.
Oh yeah, this is right up our alley, and we monitor attacks and intrusion attacks on our servers all the time, and we have infrastructure in place to try and protect against it. But as Seth said, especially when you're trying to innovate quickly and move quickly, sometimes you make a call on the type of security you're going to put in place, and I'm surprised there was no encryption on this, but even times when there is encryption, sometimes the encryption isn't strong enough. I just got back from a utility conference in San Diego, and a big topic was, how do we make sure our power plants are cyber secure? And it's a challenge. So even when there is, encryption can mean a whole lot of different things. So, unfortunately, we're going to see scenarios where this happens, and this is where we all benefit from white hats trying to break our systems, because then they hopefully we can patch the holes before black hats find them.
And I think one of the things, we actually wrote at the bottom of this article talking about this patch, which has now been rolled out to BMW customers. The way that you can mitigate the effects of this as an end user, there are some really simple things that you can do, and everybody should do. The first thing is make sure you use a password manager. There are some really good password managers now online. Do some research. Some of them are better than others. Some of them have had their own security breaches in recent years. But I use one that's connected to my phone. I have a key that I can use with my computer. You can actually keep it on your key ring. You whack it in. You type your master password, which they normally encourage you to be a phrase. So it could be a line from your favorite song, or it could be somewhere that's special to you that no one else will know. It's a really long password, and it can be 50 characters long or even 100 characters long, as long as you can easily type it. And if you're a touch typist and you're a fast typist, obviously that helps because you can be very quick. And then these password managers essentially generate random passwords. Unique random passwords for each of the things you use, whether it's your email, whether it's your computer access code at work or at home, or your telematics system in your car. And it ensures that even if somebody gets hold of a password that you might have, whether it's through another attack, they are very unlikely to be able to gain access to more than one of the things that you have. Turn on your two-factor authentication for things like mail. And don't be a victim of social engineering. So, when you sign up for those sites, it asks you your mother's maiden name or the name of your first pet. Don't actually put the real answer in. Make one up, as long as you can remember it, of course. And that will stop someone from essentially socially engineering you. And it's not until I think once you have a presence online, and that puts you more at risk. There was someone recently, wasn't there, Seth? I say recently, in the last year, someone who socially engineered her own account on one of the news sites or one of the mail sites, wasn't there? I've forgotten her name.
Yeah, I don't. It sounds familiar. I don't remember.
And she essentially hacked her own account to prove how easy it was. So that's essentially what you need to do. But with these cars now becoming autonomous in some ways, the Model S P85D now has this autonomous drive feature promised, with more cars having remote telematics or remote locking or being able to start with your phone. You really need, as the end user, to be aware of the security issues and be willing to mitigate them. So we all play a part, don't we, at the end of the day? All right, Audi confirmed this week that it's going to launch its next generation A8 next year with autonomous drive software capabilities built in. It's going to be a 27 model year car released at the end of 2016. That's a year earlier than some of the reports earlier this year, which did say that it was going to be the 2018 A8 is going to be autonomous. It will have a city driving feature that will allow you to drive autonomously at low speeds. But this is the interesting thing. Audi's technology boss, Dr. Ulrich Hackenberg, said that the actual days of complete autonomy is at least 10 years away because of some of the because of some of the legislative challenges that lay ahead. Seth, do we think that this is going to be a nightmare for the entire automotive industry, or do we think that there's going to be a trailblazer that manages to circumvent it? I mean, Tesla obviously comes to mind as being someone who likes to circumvent things and invent their own way of doing things.
So, I mean, there's two things. One is like getting it working safer than humans.
Yeah.
and the other is the government letting you do something like that.
Yeah, and it's lobbying and things like that. I mean, I can't imagine Tesla's going to have an easy time dealing with Congress.
No, so I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see a gradual, right now you can kind of be on the highway and have cruise control, and your car will slow down if you come up on somebody too quickly. And then, maybe in a while it'll start steering for you a little bit, or control the steering for you a little bit. And then, pretty soon you're going to be on the highway and you're going to be, you're not at the wheel really. And, that'll be normal. And then, hopefully that becomes normal before legislators really get into it. And then once it's normal and people are doing it and there's no accidents and there's no, people aren't freaking out, hopefully that, gets over a hurdle. And then all of a sudden, there's some city driving that happens autonomously. And I mean, this stuff is like, I was sitting in the Tesla that was steering and reading speedometer signs and stuff. And, it seemed to work pretty well, but like, it's pretty harrowing, like not having a person at the wheel and going, 40 miles per hour. It's not, I don't think we're quite ready for that yet.
Yeah.
So it's going to take some getting used to it from, humanity's perspective.
It's the uncanny valley for technology, really, isn't it? It's the idea. It's kind of, maybe it's an inverse uncanny valley. So instead of looking at something and thinking it's so human, it's so realistic, we can't, deal with it. It's, this vehicle shouldn't be driving itself. This is a car. Somebody should be driving it. And I think that's obviously a challenge. Interestingly, and I've kind of switched things around in the show notes a little bit. So if someone's worrying why we haven't done the Apple Watch story, we're coming to that next. But this week, obviously President Obama has submitted his new budget proposal to the House, and inside some of that budget is detailed extra money to NHTSA to enable it to deal with these kind of questions moving forward. How do you test autonomous vehicle safety? How do you rate a car on how secure it is if it's a connected vehicle? Matt, this is going to be legislative hurdles ad infinitum, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But, just like Seth said, I think it's important that we think of autonomy not as a single set of technologies, but as a continuum. And when on one extreme, sort of full autonomy where you're not driving at all, and on the other extreme, adaptive cruise. So like when I had the i3 here at the office, I drove home and I did adaptive cruise, and it did full adaptive cruise down to a complete stop. And then it took me through the intersection once the light went green and the car in front of me moved forward. So, that technology is already here. So, I think it's important we think of it as a continuum, and when we talk about the legislative challenges, I do think it's important that on full autonomy, like the technology is not fully ready yet. Like LiDAR does not perform well in rainy environments. Where I live, snow-covered roads is a big concern. So technology is not fully there, but Nikki, as you said, I think it is legislation ad nauseum, especially because you have to consider that autonomy is not one thing.
Right.
And we have to approach the legislation and the liability concerns on each set of autonomous technology and not view it as, cars that completely drive themselves, but solve some of the problem with the lower amounts of autonomy.
Absolutely. All right, let's look at the final story for the segment. And Seth, this is one for you. This week, a new app appeared online. It's created a massive stir. It comes from a company called LX. They're a software engineering company, aren't they? And they basically took the Apple Watch SDK. The Apple Watch obviously hasn't even launched yet. We haven't got a release date. But they built a prototype app to demonstrate how the technology could be used and to learn about how the Apple Watch SDK can be leveraged with apps. And they came up with this, which is just a phenomenal piece of software. Well, it looks lovely. I think it looks lovely anyway. Do you want to talk us through this while the video plays in the background?
Sure. So truth be told, anybody who's on Android or Google side will acknowledge that Android Wear had a Tesla controlling app that does everything.
It's a very good one as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we covered it in July, so it's been, I don't know, 8 months, and it's actually worked. I have it on a Moto 360. It works great. Like, it's, to me, like, I'm kind of like, this isn't really news, but for Apple people who probably don't pay attention to what's happening in Android land, it's a big deal that you can, open your doors and do everything that you can do with the Tesla app, using the same protocols through your Apple Watch. I mean, actually, if you read the story, a lot of people are covering it from the angle that Apple isn't really allowing developers to have access to a lot of it they want. So,
and some of the stuff that was promised but hasn't yet materialized, right?
Right. So the developers can't, they don't have access to haptics. Like, it would be nice if, like, you got a little beep when your car was done charging, or somebody was getting into your car, you get a beep, or there's no accelerometer access. So if you're looking at your Tesla app, it doesn't know to automatically turn on, or you can't like switch views by movement of the thing, which sad to say, you've been able to use the Android Tesla. It's called Tesla Command. It's in the Google Play Store. You've been able to do that with Android for almost a year now. So, from an Apple perspective, it's cool that you can do this, but hats off to Google and Android, because they've been doing it for a long time now.
Yeah, indeed. All right, well, that's the end of part 2. We'll be right back after this quick kind of PBS style thing. Now, obviously, normally if we were on PBS, we'd ask for your money. We can't ask for your money anymore due to some new, very complicated regulations that basically prevents us from asking for money from people to help us run the show. But we are looking for sponsors. So if you are a company, or someone who is advertising a product that would meet a tech-savvy audience who are interested in future cars, safer, cleaner, greener and smarter, then do get in touch, show@transportevolved. And if you're just someone who's watching at home and you want to know how to help, if you haven't already gone to the shop, which we mentioned in the first ad break, then you can do that. And also tell everybody about us. You can point us to our YouTube channel. You can also point us to us on iTunes or any other major podcast aggregators. The more listeners and viewers we have, the better it is for us. Thank you for your support of the show, as always. All right, so we're on to the third part here. This is a story from a couple of weeks ago. The Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. I'm sorry, there's a fire alarm going off. I think that's okay. There's no fire, don't worry. Our fire alarm's just in a very stupid place. I'm not going to burn. Last week there was a story about the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid, hugely popular in Europe, hugely popular. Outsold the Nissan Leaf last year. I see at least 3 now on my school run. I see 1 Tesla Model S, I see 3 Mitsubishi Outlanders and 1 Nissan Leaf. So that kind of puts it into where this car sits in Europe. Really, really popular. Getting lots and lots of praise from anyone who buys one. But the car in the US, a second generation Mitsubishi Outlander, was due to come this year. It's now been pushed back to Q2 next year. What's going on with Mitsubishi? Is it just struggling too much in the US right now, Seth? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, Mitsubishi has been kind of on the ropes for a while in the US. I don't know how it is. Obviously, it's doing better in Japan, but I don't know how it's doing in Europe. I feel like they were pulled from the market for a while, and then they came back or something. So, they already are lacking in dealerships and brand recognition and all those areas. So, it's kind of they would have to release something like Tesla or something amazing, to kind of get and break any ground. So it's not surprising for me to hear that they're struggling.
Yeah.
So
It's a shame though, isn't it? It really is, because it's such a good car. I mean, obviously you've not driven it, I'm assuming, but it's such a good car for what it is. Matt, I know. Have you seen any hide nor hair of it in Canada?
They had one of the European models that they were taking around, so a lot of folks could drive it, and a lot of folks locally drove it. We had some of our guys drive it in Europe, and we had our loggers on it. And I have a very personal desire to have the vehicle come here because that's the vehicle my spouse wants. And when we looked at the data we were getting from Europe, whether from our loggers, it looked really good. So
yeah,
I really don't think there's any technical reason not to bring it. And I think maybe they just don't have what they believe is a strong enough dealership presence. But I know there's a lot of people in both the Canadian and U.S. market that are clamoring for a plug-in vehicle of that size, and it's sort of perfect for the market. And I think it is possibly that car that Seth is talking about that Mitsubishi needs to really drive people into a showroom that they wouldn't otherwise hit. But so I'm disappointed they're not bringing it. I'm disappointed they keep on delaying it. Originally, like, this isn't the first delay. This is the third delay of bringing that vehicle.
It's sad. And Mitsubishi's not doing great, is it, with the iMEV either?
No.
I'm
sorry. I was just going to say, what Mitsubishi has done in the past is that they've partnered, I believe, like I had a Volvo way back when that was actually built by Mitsubishi. They partnered with other automakers, and basically other automakers have put their brand on a Mitsubishi product.
Yeah, I mean, that happens in Europe still today.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's something that they may pursue.
I don't see any American automakers who would make that happen. I mean, I know over here it's Citroën and Peugeot, but even then, I mean, they stopped ordering the Mitsubishi iMEV because it wasn't selling. I think
in that case, like when you look at what the iMEV was stacked up against, when it's competing against i3s and Leafs and the like, it's a much more competitive space, or even the Smart as well. So. Yeah, if they brought the Outlander, they'd have a head start. If they do continue to wait, they are going to be in a situation where there's a lot of competition.
Well, look, Porsche's coming out with its plug-in SUVs. We've got Volvo coming with the XC90 T8. Of course, let's not forget the Tesla Model X. I don't think it's fair to compare the Tesla Model X with the Mitsubishi Outlander, the different market, different segment, one size down for the Mitsubishi, but it is going to be a tough one. Talking about Tesla, though, onto the final stories of today. There's another attempt, Seth, in Georgia to end electric car purchase incentives. Now, Georgia is one of the most proactive when it comes to giving customers incentives to buy plug-in vehicles, and there's another attempt to try and end that. Do we think that Georgia's actually going to lose its incentive, or is it going to be like previous attempts and fail?
I hope it fails, but the voters don't always make the right decisions, unfortunately. The constituency outside of Atlanta there, I don't think is extremely pro EV in any way. And who's funding the opposition? We all probably is. The idea is like, hey, these guys are getting all these incentives. They're basically paying almost nothing for their cars, and then on top of that, they're not paying anything for gas, so they're not paying into the road tax and all this other stuff. And I've seen the ads, and they're pretty nasty. So those things tend to work, and I think they have a lot of money behind them. So, I'd be really sad because Georgia is kind of like one of those places where the EV adoption is extremely high for what you would imagine. In the South, they're kind of, pro oil and whatever, and they don't really necessarily care as much in general. Like, this is obviously a blanket statement that people are probably going to be offended by, but in general, it doesn't seem like they're as crunchy or as ecologically focused as other areas of the country.
It is worth noticing, though. It is worth noting and sort of jumping in that it's got the highest adoption of. I mean, Georgia, Atlanta itself has got the highest adoption.
Atlanta.
I mean, it's.
Well, they have amazing. You can almost get an EV for. I mean, if you think about the cost of gasoline, and the removal of that cost, if you spend like $200 a month on gasoline, you basically get an EV for free there. So it's a great it's a great situation, and like hopefully they can keep it up, and hopefully the lesson from Atlanta isn't that
I think he's just frozen. I don't know why.
EV, the lesson should be like if you put money into it, then all of a sudden you have all these EVs and you're going to have a lot cleaner air and you're going to have a lot less oil consumption and CO2 emissions. So hopefully it's a good lesson, not a bad lesson.
I think the thing that I want to take away from this all is to point out that the greater Atlanta area has the same population, give or take, as Norway.
Mm-hmm.
And Norway has 5 to 10% now of electric vehicle adoption. And I think if Atlanta can keep its incentives, it could go the same way. Atlanta could basically lead the rest of the US in terms of per capita adoption. But it does, there's an interesting debate sort of just setting up now, talking about charging infrastructure versus purchase incentives, and that's going to be another discussion. Moving on to kind of staying with incentives, really. Federal tax incentives for hydrogen fuel cell cars ended at the end of last year, and Toyota has been talking as if those federal incentives still exist, as if Toyota is expecting the federal government to reinstate those incentives before the Toyota Mirai fuel cell sedan goes on sale in the US later this year. And at the same point, the Hyundai Tucson FCV in South Korea has just been given a 43% reduction in sticker price. 43%, which brings it within a gnat's whiskers of the Toyota Mirai fuel cell sedan. Actually, it makes it cheaper, at least to buy in South Korea, dollar for dollar equivalent to what you get here. Do we think that these massive incentives are going to come back for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles? President Obama has just announced his proposal for the budget for the year, and one of the things he was talking about was proposing a massive change in the way that incentives work. So instead of having 7,500 for electric vehicles, increasing all of the incentives to 10,000 for any green vehicle, but then making it a at point of sale rebate rather than a tax credit. I'd like your opinions on that, please, if I can. So first question is, are we going to see hydrogen fuel cell tax credits or incentives come back? And second, do we think that the budget's going to pass in its current form? Seth?
So hydrogen fuel cell, I kind of think is dead in the water, sadly. So to that point, like if you look at the way the hydrogen works, it's kind of like the hydrogen fuel cell is the battery. It's like a different kind of battery. It generates, but it's an electric motor that's actually driving the car. And so I wonder if there's room in the legislation to like kind of classify them the same. But, in the long run, I don't know that hydrogen fuel cell can take off, especially when with seemingly better, safer, advantages in every particular area, except, the rate at which you can refuel. Technology is already exists and is rolling out all over the place. So I kind of feel like hydrogen is a distraction. As far as the legislation, I think when you come in with something, you don't want to come in where you want to settle. So I think perhaps the Obama administration wants to make sure that 7,500 doesn't get lost. And they're hopeful that maybe we can up it to 10,000 and maybe it can be a point of sale. But the reality is these things go back and forth a bunch, and the Republicans are going to try to, weasel out of any kind of incentive. So it'll probably end up somewhere in the middle. Hopefully it doesn't get worse than it is now. And, maybe if we're lucky, there's a little bit more. I think 10,000 would go a long way.
It's going to be interesting, though. I think I am one of those people who looks at it and says maybe we should have more incentives in networks instead.
Oh yeah, Absolutely.
What do you think of this, Matt? Obviously, like me, you're not in the US at the moment. We're kind of viewing from afar.
Yeah, just got back from San Diego. But I think hydrogen will get a tax incentive. I think if you look at general U.S. fuel efficiency policy, it usually tries to push all fuel efficient options. And so if you look at the infrastructure credit, IRS form 8911, I think it is, it gives you the option of hydrogen or natural gas or electricity. And so I think hydrogen will be in there. And also personally, the first electric vehicle I worked on was a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. So I personally, I think hydrogen is just, as Seth said, a subset of electric vehicles. Now, some people view it as a bit of a distraction. And I think in general, I think we'll see a lot more plug-in vehicles than what we will see hydrogen vehicles. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a much stronger play in general. But having said that, I think most people are taking an all of the above approach, and hydrogen is in there, and I think it will get tax credits. But whether or not the budget will get passed, I'll leave it for Seth to comment on that. We're in an election year up here, so it'll be interesting to see what the Canadian budget looks like.
I think we are here in the UK as well, and I think we're at a point where hydrogen, for me, I can see hydrogen as a range extender rather than as a principal form of motive power, and I support it for range extending capabilities, if only because it's better than a gasoline engine at the end of the day. If you're talking about the emissions, provided you generate it in an environmentally friendly way. But if you're using it as a range extender, that means you don't have to generate as much of it as you would if you were using it as a principal fuel source, and the way that you distribute and use it would be slightly different. All right, finally for today's show, Seth, Consumer Reports this week said that Tesla came top for its service and repair sort of attitude and quality, right? Mm-hmm. And you've had a good experience so far?
Yeah, mine's been great. We're driving around in snow and running into. We actually slipped, and the car went into the ditch, and I had to push it out. I think like 2 weeks ago, and I called them up saying, I don't know what might have, like, if anything bad would have happened to the car. And they said, yeah, it's not a problem. If you want to bring it in, we'll take a look at it free of charge. And if you don't, just keep an eye on it. It sounds like it's fine. There's no problem with the alignment or anything. So I think it's okay. But, I just thought it was nice that I could just call somebody up and they said, you can bring it in. You don't have to bring it in. It's very casual. I think that comes from, the mission of Tesla's service centers, as stated by their CEO, is that they're not trying to make money from them.
Right. That
they're just trying to break even. And that being said, on the other hand, Teslas are made out of aluminum, and if you dent it, you can't like bend it back because it has memory much differently than steel. So cars that do get in accidents, it costs a lot more to repair Teslas than it does a typical car. So, there's the give and the take. But I think overall, from a strategic standpoint, Tesla's making another kind of like innovative idea move and making their showrooms, neutral and not beholden to make money.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, this week, I have to say, well, it wasn't this week, it was the end of last year, a guy in London had his Nissan Leaf serviced, and I'm laughing because he got charged for an oil change. There's the receipt there, or the bill there. We've knocked out his car's registration number to protect the innocent. But he got charged, I think it was about £20 for an oil change on his car. Which proves, categorically, does it not, Matt, that you should read your invoice before you pay the bill.
That is fantastic.
And it took him hilarious. a long time to get it back as well, which is strange. Before I go, I just want to let you know, Transport Evolved apologised again that we didn't have a show last week. And yes, I know that the lower thirds are incorrect, and we decided just to leave them rather than try and go back and change them, because despite trying to change them 3 times before the show, they've stayed the same. So I don't know quite what's causing that. So you'll have to bear with me on that one. It was just too complex to go through and change all of the shots by hand. It should have automatically happened, and it didn't. My apologies. Mea culpa. Thanks very much for both of you for joining us today. Seth, where can people find out about you?
I'm on Twitter, LLSethJ, and on 9to5mac.com and electric.co. That's electrek.co.
Fantastic. And Matt, where can people find you?
fleetkarma.com, mykarma.com, or on Twitter at GoGoMatt.
Fantastic. And thanks to everyone for joining us today, and thanks for everyone watching at home. You'll notice I'm holding up a camera. I will explain why very shortly. I had a production assistant with me today. This is my proud parent moment. Very often getting your children to help you with stuff is not particularly easy. Getting my son to help me is not impossible. But I asked my daughter today if she'd help me do my show notes for today's show, the running order and the shot list. That is the shot list for today's show. And you can see right at the top there, she did some fantastic little artwork. And then over in this right-hand corner, without anybody asking her to, she basically did all the car badges that she knows. And at the bottom, she did her own Transport Evolved. That is just so cute. So I just want to thank her for that. And she says the final thing after the end credits is to say goodbye. So I'm actually going to say goodbye now. And say that you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on iTunes and all those other places. You can find us every day as well at transportevolve.com. And don't forget to check out our new and improved TEN show, which happens every Friday. It's funkier, it's faster, and it's a lot more... and it moves a little quicker. But anyway, and we're going to have some changes to this show as well, don't worry. Those will happen over the coming months. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield. Thanks, as always, for joining us, and don't forget to plug in. See you soon. Take care. Bye.